Welcome back to Believers IAS Academy. In today's Species in News, we will be discussing two important species, of which the first is the Assamese macaque, of course, a very important species which was in news. And then, second importantly, we will be studying about the dugong. Okay, sorry, it is dugong, right? So let's begin the today's video session. So the first species, Assamese macaque. So talking about its distribution, it is found in Southeast Asia, including Nepal, Northeast India, Laos, Vietnam, and even parts of Bhutan. So basically, it's a monkey species. So listening to this particular word, uh, I think most of you might have thought it's a parrot, but it's a species of monkey. And talking about its habitat as a whole, it is mostly which is found in the tropical and the subtropical forests, often mostly preferring to stay in the hilly or the mountain regions. So basically, they are pretty much, I can say, restricted to these kind of hilly mountainous regions itself, right? So unlike other monkey species, they do not prefer dwelling in every other areas, and they're not basically trying to be flexible in terms of their habitat, right? And then the key features of this particular species, the Assamese macaque, is the yellowish gray to dark brown coat of its body. And then one unique feature is, unlike other monkeys, it has a very comparatively short tail. And another key feature is their dark facial skin. And also talking about their body weight, as an adult monkey or the Assamese macaque weighs somewhere about 5 to 10 kgs. Now talking about the threats: poaching, habitat loss, crop raiding conflicts, and the hybridization between the other species of the same species, like Assamese macaque fertilizing, or let's say mating with other species, monkey species. So usually the genetic content of this particular species, the Assamese macaque, usually gets diluted. So hence, one of the biggest threat to the degeneration of this particular species is this species itself, right? You can call it that way. Anyway, talking about the protection. So of course, the status as per the IUCN red list, it is classified as near threatened, right? So unlike other monkey species which we normally see roaming here and there, right? So even in the cities and all of it. So this one particular is near threatened. And talking about the protection, it is listed under the CITES Appendix 2 and Schedule 2, and also Part 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. And how is it different from the normal ordinary monkey, right? So the ordinary monkey, if we have to think, one thing is in terms of the spread, right? The habitat, they are spread across various continents like Asia, right? You can even see them in Africa, even parts of South America. But this particular species is pretty much concentrated or restricted to a particular belt, especially the one that we discussed, the Southeast Asia, the including North Eastern India, the Nepal, Laos, and Vietnam, right? So that is one of the unique species. And most of the ordinary monkey species, the adaptation is really good. They adapt really well, even for the city culture as well, right? So that is one of the important thing. And then we can also see a larger population stability in the normal monkey species that we see look around, right? Especially even one of the other subspecies of the same macaques, the rhesus macaque, right? Even this is also in news, of course. But it is good to know that rhesus macaque, the Assamese macaque, these are all family of monkeys, right? So that much is sufficient. And talking about the Assamese macaque, so this is very unique. One is because of the restricted habitat, which is mostly the mountains and the forest, right? So of course these are pretty much the important takeaways from this particular species. So hence I'm just penning it down, right? And next is the distinct look, having that short tail, right? And the parted crown hair, even the dark face and all of it, right? And most importantly, why this Assamese macaque is very unique is with respect to its vulnerability. It is more vulnerable, right? Considering its IUCN status, which is near threatened, right? Unlike other common monkeys which thrive even in cities, right? And also another important thing to add with respect to Assamese macaque is that they are sensitive to habitat degradation, unlike adaptable species like the other subspecies, example the rhesus macaques. Anyway, this is more than sufficient with respect to this particular species. So now let's solve one prelims question with reference to the Assamese macaque or the Macaca assamensis. Consider the following statements. It is native to South and Southeast Asia and is found in India's northeastern states. It is listed as vulnerable on the IUCN Red List. In India, it is protected under Schedule 2 of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Which of the statements is or are correct? Please use the comment section and leave your answers below. Of course, these questions are the most probable questions from this particular topic. And why this becomes important is because UPSC has the tendency to ask questions in this format. So, because when beginners, especially people who are giving the UPSC prelims for the very first time, right, and they tend to try and read all the species and news, and most of the things that they keep in mind is memorizing all the facts with respect to every species, starting from the color, the unique characteristic features, starting from the color of the particular species, the height, right? So all of these things, of course, it is good to know, but also UPSC has its own way on how it particularly asks, or all the key areas that it focus when it tries to ask a question on a species, right? So hence solving these questions becomes important, so that you get an idea that from a particular topic, this is how a question can be framed. Well, moving on to the next topic, the dugong. The next species is the dugong. So it is also famously known as the sea cow, and also one most important thing to keep in mind, that it is the only herbivorous marine animal or marine mammal in the Indian waters, right? So it looks like a mix of whale and seal, and keep in mind it is the only is the word. So this is a very extreme statement. So keep in mind, if UPSC uses the statement that dugong is the only herbivorous marine mammal in the Indian Ocean, please ensure that this statement is correct. Don't think or don't overthink that UPSC has used this extreme statement only, so I will mark it wrong. No, right? So this is one unique feature. And then talking about the distribution, it is mostly found in the Indian waters, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Gulf of Mannar, Park Bay, and the Gulf of Kutch. And talking about the habitat, they are shallow coastal waters, right, with seagrass meadows. Usually, all of this not important. Just keep in mind that shallow coastal waters with seagrass meadows, that is sufficient, and that is more than enough, right? And in terms of their lifespan, right, they are long-lived species. So approximately, it has a very long lifespan, talking about 70 years, right? And talking about this late maturity, it is like in terms of the reproduction, right? So the reproduction phase in these species are pretty slow. Usually they attain the maturity, or they reach the puberty, or they become mature only after 9 to 10 years. Or you can just pretty much relate this particular species with the human beings, right? Of course, I'm not telling you to directly correlate it with humans, but just for understanding, you can keep in mind that even the lifespan, the longest lifespan of this particular species is 70 years, and even roughly humans today in this particular generation is also, the average lifespan is 70 years. And also considering the lifespan is 70, the age when human being attains maturity, the puberty, right, it is around 9 to 10 years. So even this is what is seen in this dugong. And this is one unique feature. Late maturity means the slow reproduction, maturity at 9 to 10 years. And talking about the calving intervals, right, 3 to 5 years, once in 3 to 5 years, right? And then population growth rate, it is 5% per year. So obviously it becomes very important. And talking about the conservation status, IUCN vulnerable, right? and cites Appendix 1 Wildlife Protection Act under the Schedule 1. So what are the threats? Habitat degradation, seagrass loss, slow reproduction, accidental entanglement and fishing nets. So all these are sufficient. Now how is this different from a normal fish? So even that is also important to know. One is, fish usually they are cold blooded, right, and they have gills for breathing, and they are pretty much known to reproduce fast, right? So they have a fast reproduction. On the other hand, these mammals, especially the dugongs, right, they are warm bodied mammals, right, and they have lungs. Why do we call, or what classifies a mammal? Mammal is someone or something, a particular species which uses its lungs for respiration, right? So they breathe via lungs. And also another important characteristic feature of a mammal is that they give birth to a young ones, live ones. So basically even these dugongs, they give live births, right, and they also nurse their young babies, or let's say their young mammals, the young babies of these dugongs. These mother dugongs even nurse them. So these are all some of the characteristic features of a mammal, right? So that is also important. So considering that this is found in waters doesn't mean that it is pretty much like a fish, but it is purely a mammal. It breathes to its lungs, gives birth to its young ones, and most importantly it even nurses it. And talking about the difference in terms of dolphins and whales, of course there are few differences also, even that is also important. Dolphins and whales, usually they are carnivores. They eat fish, squid, other animals, and they use something called as echolocation, the sensory organ. And then talking about the body species, the body characteristic features, the body shape, they are pretty much streamlined, which enables them to swim well, and they also have a dorsal fin, which usually is absent in the dugongs, right? And dugongs mostly are herbivores, and they don't have this echolocation, right? They lack a dorsal fin, and the dugongs, they mostly are herbivores. Since they are herbivores, they are not carnivores, and they mostly feed on exclusive sea grasses, which are available on the sea floor, right? So this is pretty much sufficient with respect to dugong. Just keep in mind that this is the only herbivorous marine mammal in India, and keep in mind the IUCN status, it is vulnerable. And this is also one of the important point with respect to its reproduction, that it matures very late, around 9 to 10 years later after its birth, and it has a longest lifespan of 70 years, right? Not the longest, but one of the longest, right? And then carving interval is 3 to 5 years, right? This is more than sufficient. Now let's solve one prelims question. Consider the following statements about dugongs in India. They are the only herbivorous marine mammals found in Indian waters. Their primary habitats in India include Andaman Nicobar Islands and the Gulf of Mannar. They are listed as vulnerable on the IUCN Red List and protected under Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Use the comment section, leave your answers, and that is all for this particular video. Stay tuned, we will come back with more such informative and interesting species. Until then, take care, goodbye, signing off. This is Madan Gopal.